Hello and welcome to the Focus Friday series with the KU Alumni Association, specifically the Student Alumni Network. Hello, my name is Ryan Edmonds, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Student Programs here with the KU Alumni Association, and I will be your moderator today. For today's session, we are presenting to you a financial focus with Central Bank of the Midwest. And so, speaking of Central Bank of the Midwest, today we are joined by Tracy Range. Tracy brings passion for community into her role as Director of Prosper U and a Community Engagement Officer with Central Bank of the Midwest. Why is it important for students to be proactive financially before we get into the holiday season?
Yeah, it is super important. And you'll learn that I've titled this session, Avoiding the Holiday Hangovers. I think it is super important because, again, the goal with Prosper You is to empower you financially. And oftentimes people go into the holidays and they're not recognizing the amount that they're spending, or they're not setting a budget. And so they end up in January with what we consider a hangover, right? And so a hangover is essentially wondering what happened. You're a little fuzzy, right? Not remembering what happened. And we don't want that to happen with your budgeting. So I think too, going into a new year, to where you're on top of your finances is really going to empower your financial success throughout the year.
What we're going to do now is actually turn it over to Tracy, and she has a presentation for us today. And so we're going to get that set up and we're going to turn it over to her.
Yeah, thank you again for this opportunity. And so when we're talking about, this is one of my favorite quotes that I'd like to start out with: a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And the reason this is really important, I think it's hard to achieve any of your financial goals without a plan. And a budget is a plan that's simply telling your money where to go. A budget doesn't have to be something that's really fancy or elaborate or detailed. In fact, I even suggest starting with some mental notes to get you thinking about budgeting. Most people do this naturally. And I think about that because, in fact, I mentioned to you, Ryan, that I didn't have a lot of time to prep and plan, but I did do some mental preparation. And, I kind of thought about, okay, what if my system goes down? Let me bring my personal PC, my personal laptop, so that I can switch over quickly. And so this is something that we naturally do. And the goal with mental notes, when you think about it, when it comes to budgeting and planning, is the more you think about something, oftentimes, or you're focusing on something, then that's going to impact your thinking behaviors. Okay, and so just keep that in mind, and we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so a few tips to get you started. Of course, I have another quote here, and this is one of my favorite quotes as well, and it's by Will Rogers. Too many people spend money they've earned to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. And this is one that I try to live by whenever I'm making purchases. I remember this quote to ensure that I'm making purchases that align with my budget and plans, and that I'm not trying to make these purchases to impress or to be in the in crowd. And so just a few tips to get you started. Really determine and understand the types of spending you're making during the holidays, which we will talk through various types here shortly. Then, basically just set a goal, a budget, and then stick to it. So you're essentially going to set an amount. Remember the 50-30-20 budget rule when determining how much you want to spend. This is going to help you out quite a bit. And if you're unfamiliar with that, I'm going to touch on that briefly as well. And then once these allocations are set, we can then move forward with determining what our budget is for our spending during the holidays. And again, you're going to also want to track your expenses, and we'll talk about ways that you can track as well. And so I'll have you go ahead and move on. Okay, And so determining what you're typically spending your money on during the holidays is going to be super important. A few tips before we move on. Set an amount for each one of these categories that are applicable to you, and then stick to it. If your budget is tight, some things that you may want to consider, for example, like with gifts, consider a gift exchange if you have a large family. Consider non-monetary gifts, or maybe even gift bags. I have found, and with those gift bags, I think you can put small little things in there that are meaningful. And I've gotten gifts like that, and really, those really meant a lot to me. So don't overlook the smaller things if your budget is tight. Parties, definitely pre-plan for your parties. Sometimes you can't make every party, and just determine, what your budget is, and you may have to decline a few if it's going to go outside of your budget. And that's okay, because you want to be financially well. And then food. I don't know if you cook or whatever the case may be, but I know for me, we used to always host the gatherings. And so I definitely have started with the potlucks. And so, yeah, I know that it's just you and I, Ryan, but any questions that you have about any of this info?
No, this is super. And it's funny when you were talking about decor, I caught myself looking around the room because we're in the middle of putting up our tree here. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I could put a dollar amount to how much stuff is in we have these two really big, like extra 40-gallon black containers that just are filled with just decorations. And I'm like, if I could put a price dollar on those. But I think it's good to remember that even though not everyone celebrates the same holidays, but at the same time, when you get into the month of November and December and even into the new year, there is a bunch of different things going on. From you are attending, you are traveling, you are buying gifts, and even how are you going to do, your own the space you live in, you want to decorate it, you want to feel the festive. And I think a lot of times students and even anybody nowadays, there's that feeling of, oh, I should be doing, like, my place should look like there's Christmas trees everywhere, you have stockings, like there's like an almost like you are supposed to be decorating to a certain amount. And not saying that people cannot enjoy themselves during the holiday, but you have to remember is, are you able to contribute towards this decor when you're going to be doing some other avenues? And I really liked your examples of what are some other ways you can also supplement those satisfactions, from going out and volunteering, giving your time, assisting a friend in decorating their space. There's definitely ways to kind of supplement some of those areas. But this is really cool. These categories are spot on.
So the 50-30-20 rule, I recommend this because really, if you're not familiar with it, it's essentially 50% goes to your needs, 30% goes towards your wants, and 20% towards your savings. But this rule is really one of the simplest ways to start budgeting for those that do not want like a rigid budget of tracking. And so this will allow you to only have 3 categories to where you're allocating your expenses. So number one, you just want to, be able to determine all of your spending with regards to your needs. And so your needs, again, those are going to be like your rent, your mortgage, your utilities, your car payment. These are things that you need to survive on. Any monthly payments that you currently have, like paying back debt, things of that nature. If you can squeeze that into your 50% category, then you can, kind of have some wiggle room. So your wants, again, these are going to be your nice to have. So if you're, I think, certain coffees, like people like Starbucks, and that can get expensive. Clothes, restaurants, entertainment, all of these things are actually wants. They're not things that you need to survive. And so, again, you could really live a good life if you can fit everything in that 50%, and then go with that 30%. with regards to your wants. And then savings. This should, in my opinion, is going to be a major priority. You definitely want to save, plan for 20%. And I say that because 6 months of living expenses is really kind of what you want to plan for in this economy, and with the ups and downs. Emergency funds goes into that 20%. And then some of your wants, if you're saving for a down payment on a car or a home, all of that's going to go into. So one thing that I forgot to mention is that this is based off of your take home, so your net income. So typically, retirement savings will actually come out on the front end if you're invested in any type of 401k or anything of that nature. But if you're not, then that's something you're going to want to implement within your savings as well. I personally include that, a little bit extra for retirement savings, even though I still have, a 401k and some other investments. So just some things to think about. So the last area is tracking. Again, nothing fancy is needed unless you prefer. Really, a notebook works just fine. It sounds dated, but it's equally effective. You just have a column with your needs, which is going to be your rent, mortgage, utilities, all of those, right? You're going to have that column. The next column is going to be your wants. These are, things that we previously discussed, and then your savings. It's very simple. So that is something you can do. Also, there are various apps, and I'll share a few after this slide that you can consider. Apps are a great way if you want something automated, something to analyze your spending, something to track your progress. Apps are a great way to do that. I suggest, if you haven't used any apps, to start out with some free ones, and I'll share those here in a second. There are tracking sheets. Feel free to reach out to me. I have plenty of those that I can send you. I even have some for the holiday. And so the final slide just talks through a lot of our budgeting tools that I have gotten good feedback. I'm not an app person, but these are some recommended. The Everyday Dollar, which is going to be a free tool that you can utilize, and there are some of the benefits. And then the middle one is actually Central Bank's mobile app. There's some tracking and budgeting tools on there, and then Mint is another one that I've heard really, really good reviews on. And so in closing, again, my goal is to have you go into the new year empowered, successful. I believe if you take down some of these tips and start tracking, that this is really going to help you next year.
Well, thank you, Tracy. That was very special, and I appreciate you being able to share some of the tips that you have learned and utilized, and especially when you talk about the workshops that you also present. I know these are great tools, information, resources that our students can definitely use. And funny enough, I use some of those resources myself from interacting with Central Bank. I use Mint Mobile. And so I think this information is very useful for our students going into the holiday season. If you want to learn more about Focus Fridays and more details about other sessions, including this one, please visit our website, kualumni.org, for more information. My contact information is also there if anyone has questions. But thank you again, Tracy, and Rock Chalk.
Thank you. Rock Chalk.